Hi, I'm Gerard Ratnam. Welcome to the nation. Yet again, numerous respiratory issues everyone's facing at this time in Malaysia and also outside Malaysia now. I'm joined by a lawyer, international arbitrator. GK GANESAN is also a YouTube star or rising YouTube star, and he joins us. A lot of people have been talking about him and what he's been putting out as information to the public here in Malaysia. It's coming as a brief respite that now all of us understand a little bit more of the law. It's great to understand it in a simpler way, and he brings that to us on a daily basis. Hence why he's now becoming a YouTube star. GK, thank you very much for joining us. It's good to have you here. And
Hi, Gerard. Hi, good afternoon.
It's an honor to have you on the show. Well, before I get into the questions of what's happening, so on and so forth, how have you been reconciling with what we've been going through as a nation in the past year, GK?
I've had very great difficulty in reconciling what's happening because a great many things are wrong. Our law is so obtuse and so confusing that it's difficult to understand what's going on. So that's my first answer to you. Secondly, the king has a particular kind of discretion, but it's a very limited discretion. And so at the end of today, we will know how he is going to exercise that discretion. So that's right. My answer.
Well, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong is expected to name the new PM later today, as you rightly mentioned, after the special meeting of the Malay rulers, which begins in a short while from now, about 2:30, maybe a little at 3 o'clock. Can you explain what happens then?
Well, the king will choose a person. This is what Article 43, Clause 2, Clause A states. Can I please summarize? In order to form a government, you need two parties. You need the civil service and you need the cabinet. In order to form the cabinet, you need to have a prime minister. In order to form a prime minister, the king has to choose someone from the Dewan Rakyat, not the Senate. Someone from the Dewan Rakyat who in his judgment, not in his neighbor's judgment, not in somebody else's judgment, not in somebody other than himself, to who in his judgment is likely to command. Not necessarily is commanding, but it's likely to command. The confidence of the majority of the members of the House. So it brings us to this question. What does the word command the confidence mean? Is it just numerical superiority? Suppose this person is a convicted criminal and he has appealed, which allows him to continue, the law allows him to continue as a member of the Dewan Rakyat, but he's a convicted criminal and he's on appeal. That conviction is on appeal. And majority of them support this criminal. Should the king actually accept that person as a future prime minister if you just take the numerical superiority argument? So in Article 40, Clause 2, it says, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong may act in his discretion in the performance of the following functions, that is to say, the appointment of a prime minister. So it seems to suggest there is some limited amount of leeway for the king to choose between the one or the other. And whether numerical superiority of the command of the confidence is the only test is not the only test. And it's a bit confusing. Many people are not sure about where this is going to lead us. If we give too much power into the hands of the king, then it becomes like Charles II, who simply appoints whoever he likes as the prime minister, could have appointed his gardener as his prime minister. So there is a limited power. So the king has to choose between 222 people who are in Dewan Rakyat. What if all the 222 people are crooks? The law limits him to those 222, and that is one of the problems we have in this country. Our laws are old-fashioned, they are archaic, and they were meant for English, Western-educated gentlemen who believed in higher standards of ethic, whatever that may be. The way the British ruled us, what was so ethical about it? So they call members of parliament to a higher standard of ethics. In England, if you're caught sleeping with your secretary in the House of Commons, you have to resign immediately. In Malaysia, if something like that happens, they just carry on. Nobody bothers about retiring or resigning. So nobody has resigned on the basis of an accusation. Somebody accuses you of taking a humongous amount of money, and you come out and say, I'm innocent until proven guilty, and I'm okay. So then what happens? So that's why the king has a discretion, and I think the king has to exercise that discretion in a manner that best benefits the country. So everybody will argue on the one side, no. It doesn't matter whether the person you choose as a prime minister, doesn't matter. Whether you like him or not, whether he's a criminal or not, doesn't matter. If the most number of people support him, 150 out of 222, then under the law, you must choose that criminal. I don't think that is the way the law is supposed to be interpreted, because the law is supposed to bring about just results, equitable results, and the decision of the king must benefit the country. Won't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So the discussion must be part of doing something for the best for the people. A leader who will do the best for the people, who has a track record of doing the best for the people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the king has also decreed, His Majesty has decreed, that the new prime minister will have to verify his legitimacy through a vote of confidence in Dewan Rakyat. Will the new PM be required to do this before he appoints a cabinet, or after? Yeah, this is a double barrel. It's not very ethical in broadcast, but what will be the procedure here?
The answer is, the king didn't decree, as I understand it. The king suggested.
Right.
The king suggested. I think the king suggested. I don't think the king said, I order you. I think the king said, listen, guys, if you guys are going to have some form of moral legitimacy, I think I need to have your majority tested in parliament. There's nothing wrong with that, because if you remember, some weeks ago, one senior lawyer came out and said, ex-judge, there's only one place to test the confidence of the incumbent prime minister, and that is in parliament. So aligns that argument with this decision taken by the king. Secondly, I think if you are an incumbent prime minister and you go before parliament, every year you have to ask for your budget to be approved, right? You have to put in the budget, right? So it's always been the tradition in Commonwealth parliaments, which have the Westminster model, that if you cannot get your budget passed, you must resign. So that's one of the rules. So for the king to say, look, after I nominate you, you still have to have your majority tested in parliament. There's nothing wrong with it. But remember, the last government, they did their very best to make sure parliament was never convened. So there's nothing stopping. The moment Tan Sri Maidin became the prime minister, what did he do? He wrote a letter to the speaker and said, I cannot make this meeting. Adjourn parliament until further notice. And they adjourned it. Because why? He's the leader of the Commons. He's the leader of the House of Representatives. And as a leader, if he says to the speaker, adjourn it, the speaker straight away said, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, and adjourned it. But that's not the way a speaker is supposed to behave anyway. But that's what he did. The point is, normally, customarily, respect is given to the leader of the people to determine the time when he's going to have parliament convened. So that's the real issue.
Mm-hmm. Now, what you're saying, let's take this a step further. And what will happen if the new prime minister fails to secure the vote of confidence in the Dewan Rakyat? What happens next?
Back to square one.
So can the Dewan Rakyat then propose another MP for prime ministership?
Well, you got to have a motion filed for that purpose. It'll take 14 days for the motion to be served on the other side. And if before the time the speaker, if he's very pro the prime minister, he will adjourn it again. And then nothing happens for another 6 months. Same thing, lah.
Mm-hmm. So if nothing is done today, this is going to be a carousel going around for at least another 6 months.
Back to square one. So if the prime minister loses his majority, he's got what? Under Article 43, Clause 4 goes before the king and says, Your Majesty, I've lost my majority. I have 2 choices. One, I can request you to dissolve parliament and call elections, or the other within 120 days, I think it is, under the constitution. And can you give me more time to, try and cobble another government? I don't think that.
But if you look at it, by any account, if you say majority, we're still talking about a very slim majority either way. Yeah? And this, by and large, can become a problem. So saying if one person comes in with a slim majority, how can it be set in some way that, okay, you're not going to be rocked for the next, up until the elections? Or this, we can still have this problem because we still don't have anti-hopping laws in the country. And these things about me jumping here or him jumping there might happen again.
Yes, it will. because the Parikatan national government wasn't having a problem with the opposition, because the only way the opposition could have toppled them was in parliament. So parliament was closed, and therefore the Parikatan national government very cleverly knocked out the opposition from talking. But among themselves, they were fighting. UMNO was threatening to pull out, and there was PAS, and there were other members. There was constant tension on the Prime Minister trying to cobble together a group of people who would continue to support him. But for the 27 months that he was in power, there was this tension that he might fall at any time. I still remember this. In October of 2020, he had problems. He was appointed on the 1st of March. In October of 2020, I remember writing an essay on this, which came out as a video. He had problems. So there was always this issue that that group of people in the Parikatan National were never a united front. Today, they may show you a united face, but tomorrow they may infight again. And again, what? We're going to have the Prime Minister resign? And then again, we're going to have another set of SDs, and again, we're going to go up before Parliament. So nothing happens to nothing happens to their problems. Nobody is going to put forward solutions to their problems. Everybody is going to be busy asking for their cabinet post. Or this fellow must be that fellow must be the other. And what happens? You're not running the government. You're doing it for your own importance, isn't it?
So if we were to dial back a little to the time prior to Parikatan Nasional, let's talk about Pakatan Harapan now, and how everything started, or rather the problems started accumulating. What would you say was one of the bigger problems just prior to the Sheraton move?
I think one of the biggest problems Pakatan had was it couldn't keep members of the Bersatu with them. So the guys who broke away, who took away the strength of the electoral mandate. You remember what happened on the 8th of May 2018. What was the electoral mandate? The electoral mandate was that the opposition in Pakatan Harapan should rule. So these guys actually robbed the electoral mandate, but they did it within the law. The most number of people on the one side is all that is necessary to run the government. But they couldn't prove from the 28th of February up to the time they fell, last week, that they actually had the majority. At no point did they actually test it. Only once, and that was when the budget was passed, and that was on a votes of 111. Absolute majority requires minimum 112. But some guy came and said, no, under Article 62, majority is enough. So if out of 220 MPs, 122 MPs either died sick or couldn't come, so 100 MPs come to Parliament and 61 or 51 people vote in favor of the budget, does it mean the Prime Minister has got majority support? So this kind of arguments are completely unhelpful, and our law is so bad, so old, so archaic, that it's allowed this kind of abuse to continue, and this time we did something about that.
So this is the second time you've mentioned archaic laws. We're going to come back to that, but back to His Majesty the King. He had also, I don't know if suggested or decreed, Daulat Tuanku, that for the sake of harmony, the victors should extend the hand of cooperation to those who do not succeed or did not succeed. In other words, the winners don't win it all, while the losers don't lose everything. What is your understanding about this suggestion or decree?
I think what His Majesty was trying to do, and this is purely by reading the various newspapers. Today we have many internet portals that say the things that the one party wants to say or the other party wants to say. But I think what the king was trying to do was what happened to Winston Churchill in 1946. After the war ended, Attlee withdrew support from Winston Churchill, and Winston Churchill government fell. The king called Winston Churchill as caretaker prime minister and told him, listen, I'm going to allow you to form a cabinet, but I want you to promise me. Form a cabinet, become prime minister, and within a short time, I want you to call an election. Winston Churchill agreed, kept his word, had an election called shortly after that, which he promptly lost. So what the king was trying to do was, I think, from what I read, he was basically calling everybody saying, look, the people are suffering. Put aside all your differences. Don't worry about numbers. Can you all come together, get the best team together so that we can alleviate the suffering of the people? And I think it's entirely within his right to say that he was exercising the discretion in the right way. So if the king does anything for the betterment of the people, I would agree with it.
But with what you've just said, you also did mention that the king or His Majesty has limited powers at this time, and there's only so much he can do. I think to bring this chat forward a little bit, do you think that it's right that we put all this pressure on the king at this point in coming up with a solution?
No, I think it's
was it responsible for politicians to do this to His Majesty?
Yes, I agree with you. It's not responsible. What we need now are patriots. We have politicians. We have no patriots. We have no patriots. In the 222, those who are in power or trying to be in power, they have no patriots. I have not heard anybody say anything other than two MPs who got up on the 27th of July parliamentary debate and who said, can we stop quibbling, said this opposition MP. Can't remember his name. Can we stop quibbling and talk about how we're going to help create a set of policies that will help the Raya come out of this very difficult situation? They promptly shut him up, made him sit down, and the speaker didn't allow him to continue, and the other side also just ignored him. So his suggestion of let's all get together and do something wasn't at all taken into consideration by the then parliament. And most of the guys who are now trying to come into power using that majority numbers are these guys. So really, are we interested in the affairs of the people? Are we being patriots, where we don't care about ourselves, we only care about the people? Or are we thinking about how to advance their own political career? That's the question I think the Raya is asking now.
Right. A couple of nights ago, I'd like to just move back to a couple of nights ago on our broadcast. We had Tun on, and he did mention here on Bernama that he doesn't want to be prime minister, and now we know, and that he wants to only be given a chance to run Mageran, which is the Majlis Gerakan Negara, which is to bring the country back to its former glory, so to speak. Your thoughts on that before I move into the next question?
Well, I don't agree with it. Firstly, when he resigned on the 28th of February, he lost all legitimate power to talk to anybody about any Mageran. Why the National Operations Council, a body that is not susceptible or controlled by Parliament? You know, when you have a Mageran, what happens? National Operations Council. You just knock everybody out. You get a group of people, put them in there and run the country. Who are they answerable to? So, if we have a working democracy, democracy must be allowed to work. Of course, we will get into difficulties. Of course, we will get into arguments. Of course, we'll have fellas like this who go and sit in different camps and talk about themselves becoming prime minister, this, that, the other. People are dying out there. So, you mean to tell me that if you have Mageran, you can stop all these deaths? Can you guarantee it? So, any idea that Dr. Mahathir gives, I would look at it with great care, and I am not convinced that his idea will work.
Now, is there any other way for Malaysia or the people of Malaysia to choose a prime minister? Can the people choose the prime minister directly in an election, for example?
The answer is yes, if there is a law that supports it. Look at the United States. They support a president, and they go through a process of elimination by which they choose a person. But the flaw in the American system is it's a two-party system. You can't have third parties or fourth parties going there as independents and running. Of course, people have run and they've fallen flat. If you don't have a humongous amount of money, you cannot run a campaign to become the president of the United States. And what happened in the last election, the election before the last? They elected a person who was racist, who was bigoted, who was doing all sorts of things, who encouraged the Capitol Hill to be besieged by a group of armed militants. So sometimes democracy can produce the wrong leader. That's why you got to have checks and balances. America has checks and balances. Britain has checks and balances. But there's one thing that both America, France, and various Western nations have. That I think it was Ahmad Sabu who once said in an interview that Western countries which are non-Islamic are able to give greater individual rights than countries which are based on religious models. So the point I'm trying to make is the difference between America and the Western nations and Malaysia is, in the Western nation, if leaders behave like the way that they did in the last PN government, they won't get away with it because the citizens will come and engage them in lobbying, in writing to them, in having demonstrations, doing various things within the bounds of the law without breaking the law. They would do it. Whereas in Malaysia, they will say, go down now, demonstrate. I am very busy. You go, you young people all go. We all too old. We sit in the house. Anyway, I got a wife and 3 children. So you talk like that. You hand over power to a group of people. So can you imagine the very best administrative capacity, the very best medical brain, the very best legal brain is never chosen to the very best post. In the old days, if you want to become a member of the civil service, you had to have first-class honors. If you wanted to be a member of parliament, you had to have the ability to speak, be an orator, and have some idea. I always ask politicians when I meet them, what's your argument? What's your policy about the fiscal policy of this nation for the next 5 years? Fiscal, apa itu? Fiscal. What should be the economic policy of the country for the next 5 years? Then I will ask them, what do you think about the foreign policy of this country for the next 10 years? How do we engage India? How do we engage China? How do we engage the emerging powers like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia? What should be our trading methodology? What sort of currency do we have? What should we do about Bitcoin? How do we do all this to assist the people? They cannot. They're only interested in becoming datos, tantris, becoming MPs. Everybody must call them YB, and they have no idea. Mahathir may have had some idea because he's been prime minister for 22 years or more. Sometimes Najib says quite intelligent things when it suits him. Sometimes I hear people from the opposition say intelligent things. Sometimes I hear fellas from the PAS group say something really intelligent. But on the whole, we do not have a large group of people who are able to deal with it. So we are limited to choosing these 220 people who are in parliament, and the law only requires a prime minister to be chosen from that group, which is a very limited pool of people, don't you think? Out for 32 million people, we limit ourselves to 222. We can have laws if we want. We can change the constitution, for which we need 2/3 majority. Very difficult to get 2/3 majority, but it can be done in the next election. We change the whole constitution, make sure that the prime minister can be chosen from the ground. And if you want a Malay to be a prime minister, no problem about it. But as I said earlier in a number of videos, an Indian fellow was prime minister in 1974, V.T. Samandan. In 1987, from the 4th of February to the 16th of February, 4th of February to the 16th of February, for 12 days, an ethnic Chinese gentleman by the name of Ling Leong Sek was the prime minister. So really, the constitution doesn't stop non-Malay from being a prime minister. But I know, as a lawyer, I'm not interested who's the prime minister. I have a football team. I've got Maradona on that side, who's not Malay, who's Argentinian, but he's a Malaysian. If he's going to be the guy who's going to score the most amount of goals, I'll put him there. But doesn't matter. The race point doesn't bother me. They can have all the cabinet run by Malays. I really don't care. But they must be guys who are the very best in the world. So the people must have some say in it, and we can change the law. So this is not a race-based or religion-based issue. It's a ability-based thing. And we have good Malay leaders. People who will become very good prime ministers, but because they are not in parliament. Rafizi Ramli, is he in parliament? Will he make a good minister? What do you think? You don't have to give an answer. But,
so, which brings me to the next question about about evolution, about progression. So we've got a bunch of, I've got no problem with people being old. People keep using this word old. I have no problems with that. I myself am in my 50s. So, but when you say we need a younger generation to come up, the wiser ones need to slowly step aside or make way or sort of mentor these younger people into coming to power. Why do you think that isn't happening at this point?
Well, they're not good mentors. What mentors do we have who can give us examples? Tell me, is there anyone of the stature of Indira Gandhi, of Robert Kennedy, of great leaders of the past? Jose Rizal, Gandhi? What mentor they're talking about? For you to be a mentor, you must have been able to prove your ability. You were prime minister for 22 years because you had an iron grip on the country and you had majority and you can do whatever you liked. But compared to the other leaders in the world, what did you do? So for you to be a mentor, despite your age, I think we need to have young people and ladies in charge of the country. You put the ladies in charge, get a few ladies who are Muslim ladies with tudung, who are highly educated, put them in charge. They will run the country properly. I have great faith in women because I think they make better leaders. They are more rational. They're more careful. They're more economical. They're not interested in the personal name. You know how women are. They're very responsible people. Are they more responsible than men? I think at least they are equally as responsible as men. And look at our cabinet. Not enough women. So this bothers me. We lose 50% of the talent of our country when we deny the rights of the women. So I'm not interested in mentorship. There's nothing that an elderly statesman can teach us, because we want patriots. And patriots are the guys who should lead the country. We need young people to lead the country. What's wrong if you have a lady who's 30 years old who's the Prime Minister of Malaysia? What's wrong with that? If she can do the job.
Mm-hmm.
Get my point?
Talking about cabinet, and we are quick running out of time. With regards to the cabinet, does Malaysia, and this was a question posted to me, and because a lot of people knew you were on the show today, this question was posted to me. I've got lots of other questions, but I don't think we can get through all of them. But I want to take this one. Does the Malaysian cabinet have what you call a bloated cabinet? Do we have a bloated cabinet? And what do you think is the ideal size? I'm digressing from your area of expertise, just to get a sense of what you would think would be a good size for a cabinet at this point in Malaysia.
To answer the first question, do we have a bloated cabinet? Yes, the Perikatan Nasional had 70 ministers, and the last one was a guy who was very fond of Karimi. He was made a minister. He lasted exactly, I think, 18 days. The ideal number of cabinets, I think, look at the Western governments, look at United States, look at Germany, look at the UK, look at very successful countries like Finland. Sweden, how many ministers do they have? We should follow that model. For example, I think about 15. Like what? Prime Minister, Home Minister who doubles up as Deputy Prime Minister, so we don't waste time with the Deputy Prime Minister. Finance, Defense, Foreign Affairs, Education, Industries, Investments. So trade, these are the sort of things that makes the country go round. We need to have important people there. We have hundreds of other ministries like environment and this and that. Those are important considerations. Environment ministry is one of the most important things in the world. But what changes have they done in the last 25 years, our environment ministry? So as far as I'm concerned, we've got too many ministers doing too many things. There's the old adage, if you recall, too many cooks, what?
Spoil the broth.
There you have it.
Well, I guess to spoil a broth, you need to have one. I don't think we have a broth at this point. But having said that, I'd like to go back to what you're talking about, archaic laws, and I'd like to couple that with something I think is the base or the fundamental trait of all this, integrity. Now, what do we do about archaic laws, and how do we instill integrity in our system at this point? I don't know if that's the right question, but integrity has always been my thing.
Well, just because there are no answers doesn't mean awkward questions cannot be asked. Yeah? Any lawyer will tell you that. We must acknowledge that our constitution has failed us. Every time we are in a fix, the constitution doesn't help us. It's too broad. It gives too much power. There's too much power vested in the hands of one man, the Prime Minister. He is the one who's going to recommend the AG. He is the one who's going to recommend the Chief Justice. He's the one who's going to recommend the judges. He's the one who picks the cabinet. He's the one who kicks out the cabinet. He's got so much power. He's the person in charge of the parliamentary issues, parliamentary meetings. He tells the speaker, I want to adjourn the proceedings. Speaker basically says, throws up his hands in the air. There's a guy who's a deputy speaker who said, whatever the minister says, we have to follow, So, the master has become the servant of the Indonesian servant in the house. Parliament is like the boss in the house. The cabinet is like the Indonesian maid. But today, the cabinet is controlling everything. There is a fusion between the parliament and cabinet. And the power is now in the hands of the cabinet, particularly in the hands of one man. And that leads to abuse. And it hasn't produced very good results for Malaysia in the last 62 years. That's my answer.
Now, Malaysians, we are walking from one foot, jumping from one foot to the other, walking on eggshells. Simply said, we are Forrest Gumping our way through understanding our rights as a citizen of the country. Okay, so sometimes people are afraid to speak their minds because they're afraid they would break a law, or they would say something out of turn and upset many quarters within our system. Now, how do we go about understanding this basic fundamental rights of being able to speak your mind, but not blowing your top?
I think the Rakyat have to understand that they have a right of expression unless it's going to injure some statement that's going to injure the rights of a religious group or some other racial group. I think there you have to stop. But beyond those two lines, I think people should be allowed to speak their minds. People should be allowed to say what they want to say. I remember when I was a student, one lecturer walked in and said, "You Indian fellows all are here with our permission, we don't have to give you this place. We gave you permission to talk too much." So I was upset. But then one colleague told me that person has made the wrong statement, because the Constitution guarantees equality in Article 8 and that everything must be done in accordance with the law under Article 5. But this person came and said, "This sentence upset you." Yeah. But that person has a right to say these things, but you also have a right to talk back. And I was thinking, if I talk back, I won't get my degree. So basically what we need to do is we need to be more tolerant of each other. We need to speak about it. We need to have a dialogue. And the government should not come down hard on anybody who says hard things unless they are based on racial issues or religious issues or which will cause a problem. Then we stop them. Because your right to speak is not unlimited. It's up to a point you can say things, and that limit hasn't been crossed in Malaysia. But generally, Malaysians do not want to say anything. Every time there is a fight in the streets, the mothers will run into the house, close the door, close the window, and say, "Don't go out, shh." So if you're going to have this attitude, you don't engage the government, you don't write to the ministers, you don't write to your MPs, you don't write to your executive councillors, you don't write to the king, you don't write to the prime minister, you just keep quiet, you sit in the house and think things will go away. It's not going to go away. You have to take an active part in it. That's the problem in this country. Nobody wants to put their foot forward.
Right. Well, speaking of putting your good foot forward or your right foot forward in moving on, I think most of us are fatigued. I am, for one, fatigued with seeing people die on a daily basis, seeing people come up to me and ask me for money to eat, things like that. It makes my eyes well up. I'm choked every day when I go back home and I see these kind of things. But having said that, like we're talking about it, it's healthy. A lot is happening on social media, but we need to also bring about some form of optimism. If our government cannot do it for us, we have to do it together as a people. And how do you think, doing what you've done for so long, speaking to a lot of people, meeting people from various parts of the world, getting different ideas, what can we do as citizens of this country in order to sort of inch this forward a little bit?
There's a guy called Yusuf Hashim. He's about 70 odd years old. He's ex-student of the RMC. He was one of the few guys who went out on a world cruise on a sail ship. He had a chat with me the other day and he said, suppose we have our MP for our area in a WhatsApp group and you have 22,240 people in it, or a Telegram group that's 5,000 people. You can ask him questions. You can engage him. Tell him, "You're not doing this. Come and see this place here. The drains are not working. The policemen are not doing their job here. There's no lights. There's no lights here in this place. There's water is not being supplied. So many people are dying without food." You engage them, but we don't engage them. We are complaining. Lee Kuan Yew once said, Singaporeans are champion complainers, he said, but you ask them to do something, they won't do. Ask somebody else to do. We have just copied them. We want to copy the Singaporeans in everything. So Singaporeans will keep quiet, don't talk back, just be quiet. So we are, in our head, we've got this colonial attitude that the British fellows have taught us. Don't say anything, be quiet. Stand up and ask questions. Don't fight, don't be rude, don't break the law, don't be discourteous. But the Malays call it Sani dan Tata Susila. Ask gently, why is this happening? Why can't that happen? So you guys can get together. The white flag movement, Arith Iskandar, I found out independently, has got this some kind of foundation where he goes around and helps a lot of people.
Goes around giving rice and all that.
Yes.
That's what he's
He
doing.
never speaks about it. When I spoke to him on 2 different occasions, never said one word about it. Never asked me for 5 cents. Then there are lots of groups of people. I know some group guys who are restaurateurs, who have restaurants, who cook food and send to the hospitals and policemen who are manning the streets. Now, police fellows are so tired, they're short of money. Send the food to them. There are people who send to welfare homes. There are people who actually go out and give food. Many Malaysians are doing it. And what did the PN government say? One particular state government say, if you put up the white flag, it's illegal. Send the policeman there. Are you crazy? These are guys without food. Your pride is not important. What is your position as Mantri Besar is not important. The lives of the people are important. Oh, we are looking after, we know what to do. Are you? Really? How many have died so far? Are people losing? We have about 10 million people who are wage earners in this country out of a population of 32 million. At least 10.2 to 10.3 million from statistics I managed to obtain about 2 years ago are wage earners. To that add about $3 to $4 million people who are foreign workers, add about 1.5 to 3 million unlicensed or undocumented workers. How many people have you got without jobs? Do you think society will be a peaceful place, that people will obey laws if their children are suffering with no money in the house? Won't they break laws? I'm not saying those who are poor will resort to crime, but they will basically try and find a way how to come away from the social distancing thing so that they can go and find a job. It's happening. I've got people walking in front of my house. I look at them and I tell them, okay, I can call this guy and give him $50. But what about all the other fellows who are walking on the street? And by the way, we are bullying the Bangladeshis and the foreign workers. Why are we bullying them? Those guys are...
How do you mean? When you say we're bullying, how do you mean bullying?
I've been having complaints from colleagues who are in NGOs working for these people, the way these foreign workers are being treated, particularly during the MCO. Oh, just because you are a foreigner, you are filthy, you are dirty, you are this, you are that, you are liable to be stopped. So I think we must get a grip on it and say, what if we can become the best country in the world where we look after foreign workers like they were our own workers? What if we really shared our profits with these guys so that we can spread wealth across the Asian countries and people will come to our country and they bring their expertise to our country and we look after them? What if the very best person in our country, a 17-year-old girl wearing a tudung, a nice Muslim girl who can't speak English, becomes a Olympics women's 100-meter champion? What if a young boy from Kelantan, whose name is Ahmad or Mahmoud or something, becomes the best sprinter in the world, the best, hurdles sprinter, the best poet in the world? His poetry won the best written in Malay, but won the best poetry award in the world. Why can't we have a system that produces people like that? That's the question I'm asking. Why don't we have it? We have clever people in this country, particularly those who are in the Malay stream. There are clever people in the system. Why aren't we not honoring them? That's my question, and that bothers me. Because it's the young people that we have to look after. We've got to give them that recognition, give them the expansion of the field to go out and excel in the world. That bothers me, Gerard. That bothers me.
Now, speaking of what bothers you, let's talk about what's bothering everyone. Leadership. Everyone. I was talking about mentoring, and you said, "What mentoring?" That's what you said a while ago. Now, leadership qualities in a person to lead. What do you look for when you've got a successful practice? You've got people under you, and they all need to have leadership qualities. I'm guessing at best here. Now, when you pick someone or when you look for someone to sit in a leadership role within your organization, what are you looking for?
The best testimony is not how many degrees he's got, but his conduct, isn't it? The banks call it conduct. You have to try to get an overdraft or a loan. They look for your financial conduct. So well-proven experience, mature disposition, the ability to unite different groups of disparate people into a working group of people who can create solutions, the ability to listen patiently, the boldness with which to go forward and do things which are unpopular. Mahathir was very good at it. The boldness to go forward and do things, unpopular things, do it properly, the ability to analyze situations, the ability to communicate with foreign countries, to engage in dialogue and diverse communications with different people in the country, with the ethnic Chinese, with the ethnic Indians, with the ethnic Malays, the ability to understand the preeminence of Islam and the ability to push forward an agenda where Islam is seen in the right light instead of just keeping quiet, the ability to bring the people together, to enhance the education system to be the best in the world, to enhance our young people and empower them. And particularly, I tell you, I feel very strongly about this, Gerard. You give this country into the hand of 15 ladies and make them all cabinet ministers, 50% of your problem will be solved. I tell you this.
So you keep saying that 15 people are enough to run the country at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the population of our civil service? Between 1.7 to 1.92 million. Okay. That's the last I checked. Okay. They are good enough to run it. People them with the very best civil servants in the country, the very best, most hardworking guys to be promoted. We don't need brilliant fellows in the civil service or in the cabinet. Only fellows who are hardworking, patriots, who mean well and who want to lead the country and who are patriots. They must be people who are interested in the affairs of the people. People are dying in the hospital. Go down there and check what the hospital needs. People need this supply, go and give it to them. People are having problems with floods, go and sort them out. Find out how we cannot have any more floods. Put stuff in place or measures in place that prevents flooding in the future. Year after year, rainy season after every time a monsoon comes, kada, and various parts of the East Coast are submerged in water, parts and parcels, bits and pieces of Johor and so on, Kluang and so on. So the point I'm trying to make is, we've not had effective leadership for more than, I think, 5 years.
Mm-hmm. For more than 5 years.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So you're saying what's happened before that was, you saw that as effective leadership?
Yeah. I mean,
let's take
there was some form of leadership, but you cannot compare it to the US or the UK. Or I mean, when we talk about the US, must be very careful, because they're going to ruin themselves in Afghanistan, and they're going to had selected someone like Trump, who was being as racist as you can and as right-wing as possible. But we need responsible leaders. Look at Finland. Look at Sweden. These are the countries which have the greatest, what you call, the happiness index in the world. Yeah. These nations in Finland, Sweden, Switzerland, where they have what is called a time bank. If you have no money, you can go and help poor people and old people, and that time is locked into your account, and you have 30,000 hours. When you're very old and sick and not enough money to spend, the fact that you contributed 30,000 hours to look after sick people and poor people and the oppressed and the needy will then come and help you. So they have very advanced concept. They pay their taxes very carefully. Our guys, do we pay taxes very carefully? Only few. We got to collect.
We carefully avoid taxes, some of us. That's.
I mean, you can tax avoidance is fine. You minimize your tax, but you can't evade tax. Okay, all these guys who took money and ran away and were convicted by the High Court, where's their tax? Why aren't they using Section 114 of the Income Tax Act to triple their income and bring them? Why can't they do all these things? So when the Pakatan Harapan came, it started on this path, but of course, the guys who are being investigated were also part of the Dewan Rakyat. They didn't like it and they threw them out.
Mm-hmm.
So
that
what
was
I'm trying to say is, we need to have morally competent leaders. Morally competent.
Moral competency.
Yeah, we've got leaders' children. We've got leaders who make about $60,000, $70,000, $58,000 to $70,000 as ministers. But their children have what? Italian cars, Lamborghinis, spiders, stuff. They've got properties that you cannot imagine. There's a guy who's in one place in Damansara, 5 units and lots are together, so many houses. Where did he get his money? His salary is only 60,000. How do you buy a property worth so many $1 million? How is it possible that fellows who are MPs sit in this NGO and that NGO and earn humongous amounts of money per month?
Right. They're probably very hardworking. They're probably having a second, third job. You'll never know. Yeah, I mean, people like this.
If you're a minister, you can't have a second, third job. The only job is to look after the people. Yeah. No second job. If you want a second job, resign, go back.
Now, coming back to the people, this argument. Now, I'm going to talk about COVID for a while, and I want to talk about that argument about should we open, should we not? So if you look at the good places in KL, Bangsa, Tamantun, people there, when they have debates or when they have discussions about COVID, they said it's too quick, too soon. Take this conversation down to not very far from where I am, Gomba, the PPR is down there. People say 10 people stuck in a 500 square foot house, and they have to stay there for the longest time. For them, I want to go out and sell my queer. I need to go out and work. We need to eke out a living. So how do we find a balance here? There's just so much of noise with regards to this leading up to to the cabinet and to the leadership too every time, and they are caught. They're in a tizzy, not knowing what to do, listening to voices from the right, from the left, up and down.
I tell you a story. I act for a client, and what happened was, he had 22,000 workers. He was having factories everywhere, and he got a letter from the ministry saying you can open your factory on this day. So he opens a factory, and what he does is, within 24 hours, a district officer turns up there with the police officer and says, close the factory now. Now, that police officer works under the Home Ministry, under the control of the Deputy Prime Minister at that time. And the letter was given to the factory by the MITI. So this guy takes his letter from MITI and says, I'm sorry, but the minister allowed me to operate. They wanted me to have very strong SOPs in place. I had very strong SOPs in place. Why can't I be allowed to operate? They said, you either close or we're going to prosecute you. So the CEO, the chairman of the board said, I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm not going to do anything improper. I'm going to shut down. And we are the biggest rubber product producers in the world. 67% of nitride gloves are produced in Malaysia, in the world, particularly at a time like epidemic. And this particular chairman came and asked me, how do I explain this? Billions of dollars we can make, which we can actually take and help the poor. And these guys are shutting us down, and we have the tightest SOPs in the country. What do we do? So I went down and I had a look at it, and I realized this was a real problem. So we started writing letters left, right, and center. No answer. So similarly, science is the answer. Science is the answer. Let's go and get hold of doctors who tell us how exactly we should do, and we must accept. When the doctors give us answers or the experts give us answers, they cannot be 100% right. They will make a mistake. Some parts of the science we don't understand. This disease is evolving, but sitting in the house, hiding under the table is not going to help us. If our forefathers were hiding in our villages in India or in China or in some place in Yunnan and not coming out and looking just because there was this foot hand and foot mouth or some kind of cholera, we all wouldn't be here. We would all be sitting in some place in India or China or Yunnan or some other place, So the reality of the matter is, viruses have been around. In an essay that I called 12 tips on how to overcome the pandemic, which is you will find in the YouTube, I explained that viruses have been around trillions of years before the bacterium, the human race. They will be around, they will continue to be around, they will continue to mutate, they will continue to kill people, and people will die. But because we are sitting down, Gerard, when you go to the shop or to the supermarket on a normal day, let's say there's no pandemic, you'll go past people with cold, with all sorts of germs. You touch a door in the bathroom, in the supermarket, it would have been touched by a lot of people with fecal material in their hands, and you will contract these viruses when you put your hands in your nose or you do it on your face or rub your eyes. These viruses and these bacteria, you'll get colds, you will get influenza, you'll get all sorts of illnesses. Sometimes you will die. But what happens is your body manages to manufacture defense system against them. But if you sit in the house, what actually happens is, and this is one of those things I read in one of the scientific magazines, your resistance actually goes down. In fact, one of my colleagues who's a doctor, I think it was Dr. Anand Subramanian, who said that the number of people who come to see him with reduced protection have become greater since they shut down. There's another guy called Dr. Yuga who called me and told me, look, our resistance to even simple cold is falling because we are not interacting.
Right.
So this
I've got a quick update here. We've just got word from the newsroom that the rulers or the sultans have arrived at Istana Negara. We'll be giving you more updates as we move along. We're getting some questions from viewers, and I don't know how many have come in, but this one's just come in through my chat here. The many ways the state has muzzled dissent has been continuous. What other ways can we protect the right to expression? That's a question coming in from one of our viewers. Your thoughts, Chike?
When a nation muzzles its citizens, the citizens have to rise and talk back. So the question then will happen is, you'll get arrested. You'll get thrown in jail. You will be charge in court. You have to bear with it and keep doing it and keep doing it until the government realizes muzzling is not the solution. This is typical colonial method by which the British silenced all the dissenters. So Gandhi had a number of people facing a group of lathi stick bearing policemen, and they went forward and got hammered, fell down and some of them died. Second wave went, hit them, died. Third wave went, hit them, fell down. Fourth wave, Gandhi said, proceed. If you have to lay down your life for your country, do it. No, we will not do that. So they did it. And one particular American correspondent got onto the phone and called New York and said, what is happening here is murder. This is murderous rampage of the British colonial police, using locals as gendarmes and hitting the people. Ladies went forward in droves and got hammered. Fellas were taken to the hospital at the back of bullock carts and died because there was not enough doctors to look after them. So many people have lost their lives fighting for these rights. Sitting in our house being afraid is not an answer. Lawfully exercise your right. Lawfully right. Courteously right. Engage your MP. Use social media as a weapon to bring about democracy, not as a weapon to criticize. Just criticize. Put all these funny jokes about ministers. How is that going to solve your problem? Give me some ideas. Okay, I'm giving this idea. Why don't we do this? Okay, we are in this taman. Okay, I am now one of the guys in the end of this road. I am going to collect $10 per household every month, and this money is going to be given to the Labai in the masjid, and we want him to buy the food, and we will organize a very properly tight SOP situation where we go and give the food to the poor and the needy. Organize yourself, you don't need the government's permission.
Right, we've got about 4 minutes left. We've gone on for an hour, by the way. Thank you very much for that. But before I let you go, GK, so we are waiting for the rulers to come up with a decision of some sort, and hopefully some semblance of us being able to move forward. Now, how do you want to wrap this conversation up? What would you like to say before the evening comes and before a decision?
I hope and trust that Their Majesties, the Rulers' Council, and His Majesty the King will come and choose a Prime Minister who's best qualified to lead and ask for a majority to form around him, a man who has integrity, who's got class, who's got the ability, and not just rely on majority numbers, because I think the King under Article 40 has discretion, and we need the man of the hour is one who will look after the people. Such a man we need. Thank you.
On that note, GK Ganesan, lawyer, international arbitrator, author, and also YouTube star, coming soon. After YouTube, what's going to be happening? Are you going to be having another forum? Because I think a lot of people want to have forums with you at this point. The young people want to engage with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to engage with anybody, but it must be a useful forum where criticism is very carefully spoken. We don't want to run down anybody. We do not want to be rude properly, but we must come up with simple, usable, clever ideas. Like, the white flag idea is a brilliant idea.
With that, thank you very much, sir. Vanakkam. It was a pleasure and an honor having you on the show right here on Bernama TV for an hour.
Terima kasih.
Yeah, terima kasih. Dan Demi Negara. Okay. With that, we'd like to thank GK Ganesan, lawyer, international arbitrator, author, and YouTube rising star, for joining us right here on The Nation for an hour. Of course, once again, like I said in the early hours of the show, we're waiting with bated breath. Pray for Malaysia, everyone. Everything should be okay soon. Take care. I'm Gerard Ratnam, signing out.